So revenue drop, and what happens when revenues, utility demand drops is this: fees go up and rates go up. And you're starting to see that across the country. Utilities in Arizona, here in California, are trying to impose new fees, and the rates are going to go up because, in fact, utilities make money on their investment. And they have invested all of this money. They need to make a return on those investments. And the Public Utility Commission historically has guaranteed those returns. So when the denominator goes down, basically, when the numerator goes down, basically they have to raise the fees. They have to raise the rates. Okay? It is happening. Every day it's happening across the country. And of course, as rates go up, this makes solar even more financially attractive. Does that make sense? Because their rates are going to go up and solar keeps going down. So it makes solar that much more attractive. More financially viable, more people get into the business, more people adopt. So we're all here in the Bay Area. Do you know how much you pay for electricity? Well, you should. This is from PG&E's website. This is what the PG&E customers pay. Tier 1, basically the first 273 kilowatt hour, 13 cents, then 15 cents, then we pay 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And then we pay 34 cents per kilowatt hour. 34 cents. In solar today, in the sunnier areas, is already down to 10 or 12 cents. Palo Alto signed an agreement to buy solar for 7 cents, 6.9 cents. So Palo Alto is buying solar at half the rate, half of PG&E's lowest rate. Solar. Okay? Already. Done deal. And that's not the cheapest solar that I've seen. First Solar is building a power plant in New Mexico, where I was 3 weeks ago. That is going to sell its output for 5.7 cents. 5.7 cents. Nothing else, no new plant can generate at 5.7 cents. Okay? It's going down by the minute. So 5.7 cents is less than half of PG&E's lowest rate. I'm not talking about their highest rate, which is 34 cents. Now, these are large scale, not distributed.
Is that price the wholesale price?
Yeah, that's a wholesale price.
Yeah.
And that's what I just said. It's not retail, it's wholesale. But that is the shape of things to come, right? The president, the co-founder of Longevity, told me a few weeks ago, 90% of our customers start saving money on day one. And most of their customers are here in California. 90%. So the whole concept of payback for solar has been turned on its head. What does payback mean when you, A, don't invest any money, because it's solar as a service, and B, you start saving money on day one. On day one. You don't need to wait 5 years. On day one. And of course, as power goes up, conventional power, you save even more as time goes on. Okay? Now, this is playing out in every market around the world. Conventional energy prices always go up historically. They may go down like for a year or two, but historically they'll always go up. And solar will always go down. So this will play out, whether this point is today or in a year or in 10 years, depending on the market. This is going to play out in every single market in the world. Okay? Now, two things happen when this happens, meaning cost of solar below cost of grid. One is that on-site solar generation means lower revenues for the utilities, and I just said that. But two, and even more importantly, is that solar, when does the sun shine? Sunniest days. When do utilities charge the most for power?
Summer.
Summer and the hottest days, right? So those are the utility's highest margin product. Now, the cost of generation doesn't change any. If you have a nuke, if you have a coal plant, and so on, the cost is the same because you have to keep those plants running basically 24/7. So the same 6 cents or 10 cents that it costs to generate nukes or coal or whatever, you have to keep running it. Now, let me show you. Arizona. In Arizona, off-peak, 5 cents. Super peak, 50 cents. The price, not the cost, the price of peak power can be 10 times what the off-peak power is, the price. But the cost is the same to generate that power, except for the peaker plants. Peaker plant is usually a natural gas plant that you switch on and off when the peak is starting to happen, right? Except for those which you have to turn on and off, most of the utilities have baseload, and they keep producing at the same cost. 5 cents, 50 cents. Solar on-site is disrupting this, the 50-cent product. So not only are their revenues going down, their margins, because this is a 90% margin product. Does that make sense? Or 80%. Solar is disrupting this, the 80% margin product. Not the, 10% margin product. This one. And as summers get hotter and peak prices go even higher and higher, in Texas, the grid operator in Texas, ERCOT, approved a doubling of wholesale prices from $3 to $6 per kilowatt hour. Now remember, solar 10 cents or 5 cents, $6 per kilowatt hour. Because summers are getting hotter, longer, drier, and utilities are not investing as much. So, when you disrupt the company's higher margin product, you're basically disrupting its whole business model. Does that make sense? And that's what solar on-site does. So, look, here's a fact. Since 1970, solar panels, solar PV prices have gone down from $100 per watt to 65 cents per watt. This doesn't include installation and balance of system and all that. This is solar panels. Solar panels have gone down 154 times since 1970. Every other form of energy has gone up. By how much? I'll tell you the relative numbers. Solar has dropped relative to oil since 1970 by 5,300 times. 5,300 times. What that means is that oil prices have gone up by 30 plus times, 35 times I think, while PV has gone down by 150 times. Now, if you think that on a relative basis, Your competition can lower costs by 5,000 times. And you're not going to be disrupted? Think again. Relative to nukes, nukes have gone up 10 times since 1970, maybe up to 15 times. But even if you take 10 times, solar has improved its cost position relative to nuclear by 100, by 1,000, by 1,500 times. 1,500 times. Okay? Natural gas, which is supposed to be like at all-time lows, solar has improved its cost basis relative to natural gas in the US by 2,200 times. Coal by 900 times. So not only is it the fact that solar is going down, and keeps going down because it's a technology with free energy. It's a technology. We're comparing a technology. Every other form of resource-based energy has gone up by hundreds, thousands of times. So, what happens in the solar distributed rooftop solar disruption? So demand for utility energy drops because prices for utility energy keep going up while solar keeps going down. Competition increases. I've mentioned this. Utility margins drop disproportionately because solar disrupts their highest margin product. Which means that utilities are going to come back and say, look, you're cheating. You actually have a product that works and it's cheaper and it's faster and better. We need to raise our rates. Okay, so of course they raise it, right? But what happens? When they raise the rates, this makes solar even more financially acceptable because rates go up and solar go down. So in Australia, energy had gone up by 50%. Competition, does that make sense? So solar gets to be more financially viable, and then what happens? Feedback loop. More solar, utilities make less money, less in profits, which means that their cost of capital is going to go up. So the less money that they make, banks are going to be like, whoa, yeah, I can lend you money, but I don't know, it's going to cost you more. Because utilities for 100 years were a safe investment, no more. Because we now see what is happening, right? And so when their cost of capital goes up, their energy goes up, their costs go up. So oil and gas and nukes and all those go up, and the cost of financing those power plants go up as well, right? Which means, oh, and at the same time, because solar is increasing adoption, more banks know the risks. What is happening? Their cost of capital goes down. And these things are happening as we speak, both. The cost of utilities, cost of capital is going up in high penetration solar markets and wind markets, and the cost of financing solar is going down. Not as fast as it should, but it's going down. Question?
So would it make business sense for them to start going into solar?
Does it make sense for utilities to start going into solar? Yes. Right? Yes. So when you are being disrupted, you don't have many choices, right? Your choices are get out while you can, and the other one is fight back, which is what utilities are doing with all the political power and this and that, or buy into the revolution, buy into the disruption. So utilities should be doing exactly that. And by the way, not all utilities are fighting, right? The best example of an energy company that has adopted solar wholesale and retail is NRG. NRG. I mean, they have gone solar in a big way, right? They're doing it the right way, but most utilities are not. So cost of capital for solar goes down, cost of capital for utilities go up, their prices go up, solar prices go down. All of this enables even bigger solar adoption. Does this make sense? This happens in technology markets every day. You have a virtuous cycle for the winner, and you have a vicious cycle for the losers, right? I mean, I wrote a book a few years ago called Winners Take All, which is what happens in technology markets. In technology markets, you always end up, or usually you end up with one or two winners. Cisco, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, you have these markets with one winner, maybe two. Question?
Yeah, so, but we have a problem because they are responsible for the overhead, for the lines and underground overhead. And so they're gonna, if they start cutting corners, we're gonna have more explosions like we had in San Bruno. So how do we address that in this particular case?
We'll get to that point, right? We'll get to that point. I want to talk about why the utilities are going to be disrupted, right? How to manage the utility, the whole regulatory process, that's a whole different conversation. We can talk about it, but I need to go through this. Yes.
In your book, you said that most of those plants, coal, and they have like a 40 years life period, right?
Usually, yes.
So it probably will take 40 years till new plants actually go to solar, because it won't pay the project to just buy a new technology if you already invest in an old one.
Yeah. So in the utility business, they call that a stranded asset. Basically, they invest with the idea that it's going to last 40 years, but it doesn't. They just have to shut it down, right? So what's going to happen in that case? Well, yes. So what's going to happen in that case? They have to get ready for that. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. We're going to see a lot of bankruptcies over the next few years.
Goes
in
the way the
utility
mainframe
business.
went, right?
Huh?
It goes the way the mainframe went.
They go the way the mainframe went, the way the horse and carriage manufacturers went. It went, the way that the computer companies and disk drive companies and Alta Vista and 30 companies and I mean even solar PV companies. I mean, we've seen 50 or 100 companies shut down, and that's the nature of markets, right? In the early 1900s, there were 250 car companies in Detroit. 250 car companies in Detroit. Now, how many survived? Even, in what ended up being the largest manufacturing industry in America for a century, most companies went down. I mean, that's the nature of the beast, Am I worried about gas leaks? Yes, I am. Am I worried about nuclear power plants going boom? Yes, I am, right? And it's going to happen. As they cut corners, it's going to happen more and more. So as a society, we need to worry about that, yeah? But none of that is that is not an excuse to keep the utilities. That's an excuse to change the business model, right? And we can talk all about that. I mean, I have ideas as to what we should do, but that's another conversation. So utilities have already entered in high penetration markets, the death spiral. I mean, it's already happening. Solar is growing in the US and California at 70+% per year. It's growing around the world at 43%, right? And if they don't adapt, and they don't adopt the new business model, they're gonna die, I mean, they're used to the monopoly world in which they could basically get away with anything. I mean, even if they make a bad investment, we need to pay for it, right? I mean, in the real world, if you make a bad investment, you lose the money, not utilities. Utilities get to be reimbursed for all that money that they lost. Yes?
I'm just curious, the deployment or installation model in Australia and in Germany, is it different than here? Or is it residential rooftop solar as a service, kind of like Solar City? Or is it somehow different?
It's all of the above. A lot of these operations in Australia were more cash-based, but financed by banks. So it's more like buying a car than like Solar City. Yeah. So what I was saying, solar has gone up 100x since 2000. So while, you know, the media conversation is, oh, solar is a disaster and whatever, solar has been consistently growing at 43% per year since the year 2000. And, you know, what happens if this growth continues at 43%? I've done the numbers, okay? And the numbers are not pretty for the utilities. So one of the things, so I've asked you to read the report by the Edison Electric Institute, which is the utilities lobby organization. And basically they say that no worries, we have the poles. We have the transmission, we have the distribution. We are not going to be, you know, this is not a total disaster, right? So the question is, are poles an asset or a liability?
Liability.
Hmm?
Liability.
Let me respond, right? So I've looked around, and in Europe, the cost of the network is transmission and distribution. Is about 6 euro cents on average across Europe, which is what, 9 cents, US cents? And in many countries, actually, the cost of transmission is bigger than the cost of energy. So this is true today. Now, if you're a vertically integrated company, then that is not an issue, because you just add up all the costs and you get it basically paid for by the ratepayer. But if all you're providing is this chunk, then it does matter. And it does matter in the US and it does matter in Europe. So 9 cents US cost of transmission, 7 cents US cost of transmission, and distribution. Of course, you know, like I said, every market is different. So everything that I'm telling you has to be adapted to each specific market, cost of energy, cost of network, but the principles apply pretty much in every market. So as the cost of solar generation keeps going down, like I just showed, it's been down by 154x since 1970. Basically, here's what is happening, and here's what I see. At some point, the cost of rooftop solar, residential and commercial, is actually going to be below the cost of the network, the cost of distribution plus transmission plus, you know, the CEO of PG&E and all those kind of costs, right? Now, assuming that the cost of distribution plus transmission is 7 cents for basically this thought exercise, and that's about what it is. Here's the question. At which point is on-site rooftop solar going to be below that cost? Because when it gets to be at that cost, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is, it doesn't matter, which is not going to happen, not in the next 15 years anyway. It doesn't matter, because just the cost of transmission and distribution is higher than the cost for you to put up a solar rooftop. So the question is, when is that going to happen, right? So if residential solar is 10 cents, which it already is in many markets, the utility will have to produce at 3 cents, plus transmission and distribution. 3 cents. No new power plant, none, can generate at 3 cents. Right? Now, you have old plants that have already been paid for that can, but no new power plant can generate at 3 cents. Not even close. So let's do the numbers. I just said that when the cost of solar approaches that 7 cents, the utilities, centralized utilities, have no business, because they can't compete at any price. Okay? So when is the cost of on-site rooftop solar going to be 7 cents or below? Of course, it's going to depend on regulation, financing costs, and capital cost of solar, which vary by market. So in some markets, the utilities have a lot of regulatory power. I mean, they can sway the legislature to pass taxes for them. And you will read about those solar taxes. Many legislatures in the US are already starting to pass solar taxes. And these are attempts by the utilities, but the conventional utilities, to fight back, right? Cost of financing and the actual cost of solar. So I talked about Lancaster, California, at the beginning of the class, and I said that they have a new law that every new home has to have solar on its rooftop. Period. It's the law. Now, solar PV, they're the first ones, in my mind, anywhere. But there are other countries that have had solar water heater, basically requirements, since the 50s. In Israel, since the 50s, they've had their requirement to do solar water heating. In southern Spain, in Australia, and so on. But solar PV, this is the first one in the world ever. Now, if when you buy a house, it comes with the new solar PV, what does that mean? What that means is you're going to finance that PV with your mortgage, right? And what is the mortgage today? 3%? 4%? Or so, right? So that's effectively the cost of financing rooftop solar. It's going to be 3%, it's going to be 4%. But wait, there's more. Solar, according to Citigroup and Green Tech Media, is supposed to go down another 2/3 by 2020. So by 2020, we can say that since 1970 to 2020, solar will have gone down in cost by 4,000 times. 4,000 times. So according to Green Tech Media and Citibank, the cost of residential, total installed cost of residential rooftop solar is going to be $1.12 in the US. Okay? $1.12 per watt by 2020. Now, how hard can that be? Guess what? In Australia, it's already $1.50. In Australia, it's already, basically what they're saying, Citigroup and Green Tech Media, is, look, we just need to improve the cost by 20% on what Australians have already achieved. Does that make sense? So $1.12 per watt is really not a stretch. If anything, it's like, I would be surprised if it were lower, but let's do those numbers. Anyone who wants to see the dollar figures in Australia, you can go to a website called solarchoice.net.au, and they have basically the cost of installed solar in all of Australia. So there's a lot of numbers here, but if you want to look at Perth, for March of 2014, on average, the installed cost of solar was Australian dollars, 162, which is $1.51. On the low end, in Perth, you can find $1.15 Australian, which is that's not $1.15 US. That's less than $1 US. It's about 99 cents or 98 cents. Today, this was last month. So, how hard is it for the US, for us, the biggest technology, country in the world, to catch up to Australia in 6 years? I don't know, right? In Australia, in Perth, you can already buy solar at what Citigroup and GTM say we're going to achieve by 2020. That is not a stretch, right?
Is that with subsidies?
No subsidies. This is the cost, installed cost, no subsidy, the actual cost. That's a good question. No subsidy. So I did the numbers. If you install by 2020 a new house in Lancaster, which will be financed with a mortgage, so I mapped the cost of capital from 0 to 10%, and a mortgage would be somewhere here, now or in 2020. And you take the 112 cost that Citibank says we're going to have by 2020. Basically, a house in Lancaster in 2020 is going to generate solar, no subsidy. It's going to generate solar, no subsidy, at 4 to 5 cents by 2020. A home in Lancaster, California, by extension, LA, San Diego, Phoenix, and so on, basically the southwest of the US, will be able to generate solar energy on site at 4 to 5 cents. The cost of transmission will be 7 cents, 5 cents, no less than that. Solar generation on site will be lower than just the cost of distribution and transmission. The utilities will have no business. I mean, they will have to sell energy at minus 2 cents, at minus 3 cents, in order to match solar. And that's not sustainable. Not sustainable in the green way. That's not a financially sustainable business model, right? I will talk about storage in a second, but this cost is going to happen everywhere. It's just a matter of when and how. But the cost of solar is going down. It's going to continue to go down.
So are you saying goodbye to monolithic centralized energy?
Yes, that's the whole point of the clean disruption. The centralized, monolithic, old model energy companies are gone. They're zombies, right? Over the next 15 years, pretty much kaput. Okay, once in California, they're going to go first. In Germany, they're going to go first, and so on. I mean, they're not going to go at the same time, but they're all going to go. If they don't adapt to this new world, they're going to go. I mean, I'm not telling you, I'm doing the numbers. You don't like the numbers, change them, right? They can have any opinion they want, but they cannot have any data they want, right? So, when the cost of solar generation is lower than the cost of transmission and distribution, the utilities are gone, they have no business. Now, they're gonna not have a business way before that, because it's not gonna be a binary thing, boom. As the cost approaches that, they're basically out of business. So, cost of on-site rooftop solar will be lower than transmission and distribution. Each market, the same conversation, the same thing I told you about grid parity. Each market has a different dynamics, cost of capital, regulation, easy politicians, things like that. Cities are gonna be different from suburbs. If you live in San Francisco in a tall building, then, basically, will you be able to generate on-site solar? No. So different places have different dynamics, but that is gonna happen pretty much everywhere, okay? Lower cost of PV. PV will keep going down. Cost of capital for PV will keep going down. And installed cost will keep going down, period, right? It's just a matter of time. And resistance is futile. It's inevitable. Resistance is futile, right? Technology has its own dynamics, it's gonna happen. Now, okay, it's inevitable. It's a matter of when, where, and all that good stuff. So let me tell you about net zero, which is another reason why utilities are gonna be disrupted. Net zero. Has anyone been to the Exploratorium? Wow, excellent, excellent. How do you like it? Yeah, like it? Yeah, I love it. It's great to play with with the kids, with the 9-year-olds. Exploratorium has 1.4 megawatts of solar on its rooftop. 1.4. And this solar generates all the energy, 100% of the energy that the Exploratorium uses in a year. Now, with solar energy, they pump water from the bay, they clean it, they run the heating and the cooling. So it's not just electricity, they run the motors. I mean, it's really a marvel of engineering that a science museum came up with, right? And without solar, its energy bill would have been $300K per year. So as solar gets cheaper, more and more users, whether they're residential, commercial, industrial, and so on, you get two things. As in any technology adoption life cycle, you get two things. New users who are going to buy a little bit of solar, but also existing users get to buy more. I mean, and that's normal in every adoption life cycle. So what is going to happen, this is the rooftop. I took this picture. The one thing that surprised me was the number of birds. But otherwise, I mean, this is like a sea. It's beautiful. Two things are going to happen. More people are going to adopt solar, and those who adopt solar are going to increase the number of panels that they have, because it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. That's what's happening already. Until they become net zero users, right? So net, they're gonna sell with net metering the power that they don't use during the day and buy it back from the grid when they actually need it. But in their case, they're also doing combined heat and power, which is even more efficient than normal electricity. So again, the dynamics of PG&E is making $300,000 less than they would have made. Or if they made $150,000 last year, that went down to zero, right? But because it happens during the day, large user, margins go down disproportionately, vicious cycle. See what this does? Net zero. And the Exploratorium is just one organization. They're even a nonprofit. IKEA, so this is big box solar. IKEA already, 89% of IKEA's stores are solar. They have installed a total of 34 megawatts, and they have a plan to both be 100%, but also they have a plan to be net zero by 2020. So IKEA is going to be a net zero organization by 2020. What about the big Walmart? Walmart has 89 megawatts in 200 stores, which is just 5%. But they have a plan to install solar in 1,000 of its 4,000 stores by 2020. So they're going to quadruple the number of stores. And they also have said that they want to generate 100% of their energy using clean sources. I haven't seen the year, but they have that goal too. So Apple also has said that they want to be a net zero organization. Now Apple has billion-dollar data centers, which consume a lot of energy, and they want to be net zero also.
Yeah.
So what happens is loss of revenue, loss of margin, vicious cycle for the utility. This is happening in residential, in commercial, in industrial. It's happening at every level. But it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse because I did the numbers. If Walmart actually installs 874 kilowatts, which is what IKEA's average is, in each one of its stores in America, they will have the generation capacity, the peak capacity of 4 nukes. 4 nukes are going to have to disappear when Walmart has solar on all its rooftops. Right? Nukes are already not competitive. Imagine when Walmart generates on its rooftop. Plus, because you have to have the transmission and distribution and all that. If Walmart put up just that on each one of their stores worldwide, that's the equivalent, the peak equivalent of 10 nukes. 10 nukes. But it gets worse. Not only are utilities going to lose business, what if Walmart decided to get into the energy business? They've got into every other business. Last week they announced that they're getting into the money transfer business. Why not energy? Energy is easier, much easier. When I talk about later EVs, actually, why wait? I did the numbers. And if Walmart in the US puts up solar on every rooftop and every parking lot, in every store in the United States, they could power 20% of all the electric vehicle miles in the US for a year, right? Every year. Should I repeat that? Americans drive 3 trillion miles per year. Walmart alone with solar could generate the power, solar power, to run 20% of those 3 trillion miles per year if they were electric. Walmart alone, one company. Does that make sense? Now, if you are an executive in a utility company, are you losing sleep? You better be. You better be, because they can't compete. That's not in their DNA. Every time something happens, they go running to the Public Utility Commission. They just cannot compete. Walmart is one of the most competitive companies in the world, and big and powerful. They could match the utilities in lobbying power. Solar City can't, Longevity can't, but Walmart could. So increase in competition, and it's not just Walmart and IKEA, it's a whole bunch of companies. Big box solar. Next time you go into an industrial or suburban or penturban area, and you see all those big boxes, Walmart, IKEA, Safeway, Staples, and so on, just think solar, right? My girlfriend says solar, right? Because I'm looking at, yeah, solar, yeah? There's no reason why those rooftops should be empty. These companies can make money on those rooftops. It's not being green, it's making green. All right, yes, question?
Are they having special tariffs to feed in, or what they're feeding in they can get out of the grid?
There's no feed-in tariff in the US, except for, a couple of places. There's no feed-in tariff.
So what they feed in, eventually they can fall back.
Yeah, so right now, we have net metering,
Yeah.
so that the excess you can put on the grid and so on. But I'll talk about storage before the end of the evening. And I'll tell you, so the utilities are fighting back. They're saying net metering, you're using the grid, then you should pay for using the grid, blah, 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 right? But I'll tell you about storage in a few minutes to see how long the utilities can use that line of to fight. So we've gone through the first 4. Why don't we take a 5-minute bio break, and I'll come back to tell you about the other 2 reasons why utilities will be disrupted. 5 minutes.